go sell a customer. Like, stop working on your pitch deck. Stop thinking about like the ways to get in front of a venture capitalist. Get in front of a customer, a potential customer, and try to sell them the thing. In the beginning, what you really need to do is have a problem that's solvable, that you have an advantage in solving, and then get enough users that you can get useful feedback and figure out how to make that thing scalable, repeatable, and then start going aggressively after a customer base that will pay you for that. I'm really good at ideas, and I'm really good at getting people excited about what I'm doing, and I'm really good at picking people. Like, those are my three areas. Like,
you're Steve Jobs.
No, that's really demeaning to Steve Jobs. So I can't claim that.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Founders Corner. In today's episode, I have another very special guest. This one, I think, is going to be a great episode because him and I just love talking. And so this is going to be an exciting conversation. But his name is Robert from Citizen Bank, and he is an angel, startup enthusiast, super connector, whatever you want to call him. Robert, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited. I think you set the bar really, really high here. So I'll try not to disappoint your audience too much. But yeah, we had a bunch of fun the first time we talked, and the second time, the third time. So I guess this will be much of the same.
The funny part is, the second time we talked, I was like, you know what, I'm good. And you're like, oh my God, thanks for giving me time back. Like, this is huge for me. And we literally just kept talking. It just didn't stop.
Oh, yeah, it's actually one of my pet peeves too. Is like, if the meeting concludes and someone says like, I'm glad to give you the time back, like, take the time and get off the call. Like, we all need the couple of minutes between all these Zoom calls to just have a minute to breathe, take notes, do follow-up items, check your email. Be a human, right? And whenever you get those minutes, I always like if I say here's time back, I try to honor it. But we just blew right through that, and I'm pretty sure we were both late to our next meeting. So
we definitely were, and that's the funny part. We finished the meeting, but that's what I love about this kind of world, like, right? And you and I just have so much to talk about. So before we start this episode, and we know this episode is going to take a while, so let's get into it quick. Who is Robert Hughes, and what do you do, and why do you love startup world so much?
That's a complex and complicated question that I'm trying to
I like
answer.
to start it off with the complex stuff, get that out of the way.
Who are you? I think so I think the backstory on me is I went to architecture school. I got my master's in architecture at Wentworth. I graduated during the Great Recession of 08, 09. And when I got out of school, all the architecture firms were firing people, not hiring people.
Yeah.
Looked into my skill set. What else was I good at? I was good at talking to people. Made my way through financial services. Ended up at First Republic Bank. I launched their startup and emerging venture capital practice on the East Coast about 7 or 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then that came to an end this year. And so I'm relaunching that program over at Citizens Private Bank right now. As far as like who I am, I think generally I'm a spongy person. I like new ideas, new people. When I get into a subject area, I tend to double click on it quite a lot. And
you go in deep.
Oh man, like the shoes behind me, Formula One, tequila, CrossFit. Everything I do, I just sort of, when I get into something, it just tends to compound, and I can't stop until I've finished off that obsession. So
that's a disease, Robert.
I know. It's really helpful though in the innovation space, where there's always a new company building something novel or new or brand new, and then fund managers who have a new perspective on how they want to deploy capital, and then the fund of funds and the family office folks who are like looking for new opportunities to get outrageous returns. And so it kind of suits me that no day is exactly the same, no conversation is exactly the same. And a lot of times, you meet a new founder and there's a new idea or new area that you need to go Google, figure out what that is, and then learn as much as you can. That's so it kind of keeps my brain going.
And one of the cool things is that you're starting a podcast for F1.
That's right.
Is that still in the game plan or what?
Yeah, so it's called a double stack. I'm gonna be launching the first test episode in 2 weeks with a co-host, and the idea is to get all the people that have started watching Formula One through Drive to Survive, give them a game.
That's how I got into it.
Hey man, you're not alone. There's a lot of people. I think it's actually beating like the NBA in ratings or average
Oh,
ratings now. So
probably.
it's
Yeah.
doing awesome.
Because
But
it's
you know
worldwide,
this.
right? That's one thing most people don't understand. Formula One is worldwide. Like it's everywhere. There's little pockets in every country, but there's a lot of countries. So
It's an international sport. It's,
yeah,
I think, described as like the traveling circus because there doesn't exist one place. It exists in many nations.
yeah.
And then the intriguing part about is the engineering part side of it, where it
Oh,
is a
it's
sport of
insane.
engineering and
It's
innovation.
insane.
The Our cars today are V6 turbo. We have V6 engines that do like 800 horsepower on street cars because they brought that technology
From
forward
Formula
through
One.
Formula One.
Yeah,
And now
yeah,
they're doing, really great work around sustainable fuels combined with the hybrid engine. So they're going to have completely sustainable engines by 2030. And watching them kind of engineer their way through that and innovate their way through that is
yeah.
really, really incredible. But
True.
yeah, don't get me going, or this will become a Formula One pod. But I highly suggest that
Well,
if
listeners,
you like
you heard
innovation,
it
that's
here. You heard it here.
fun.
By the time this launches, your podcast will be up. What's it called?
Yeah,
It's called what stack?
it's called the double stack.
Double
The
stack.
double stack is when you bring two cars into the pit at the same
Oh,
time,
brilliant.
and yeah, and if you pull it off, it's like the chef's kiss of being a pit crew. So I'm trying to make this the chef's pit or the chef's
Red Bull does it
kiss
really
of a
well.
pod. No, they do it really well. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so Robert, you've been in the startup world for a very long time now. You've
yeah.
been an angel, you've been an enthusiast, working with a lot of founders. This being a podcast for startups and not for Formula One, so let's focus here. But
Let's go.
but what is it that you see a lot of times happen for founders? Like, what would you say, like when you meet a founder, you're like, oh, this is the number one shortfall or shortcoming for a founder?
That's a good question because it has a pretty broad span. I think the most common one I see is the ones where they don't do enough research of like, has this
Hmm.
been created before? Is this being created now? And if it has been created before, why was it unsuccessful?
Right.
And part of the reason for that is like many of these companies that are created fail in darkness and no one publishes like, hey, why did that project go under? Why was this team unsuccessful? What happened? And there's no real like a depository you can go to or a directory and look at like, okay, if I want to start this type of fintech company,
Yeah,
how many
no.
times has this been done,
Yeah.
and why wasn't it successful, or is somebody working on it currently? And so a lot of it's very hard to navigate when you're starting to think of, hey, I have this problem I want to solve. It's hard to figure out very early on, hey, has someone tried this recently or someone doing this now? And or has this happened in the past, which is the harder one? And
Right.
if so, why wasn't it successful? So that's a pretty common one. And another one is just not understanding how long they're gonna have to go without paying themselves.
Yeah. And
That's a
that's a
big one
hard
too.
question to answer
Oh,
too.
yeah, that's a tough one, and it's a lot too because companies go out of business when when you can't make payroll or when you can't continue on the
Hmm.
mission because
Yep.
you just don't have money to feed yourself. So
Yep.
those two come up pretty well frequently and infrequently, but those are the most common ones. Besides that, it's like founders not knowing themselves, right? They're not knowing their
Right.
skill set, what their weaknesses are, and how to offset that, or not knowing how often they should be like the quality of people they need to surround themselves with to be successful.
Do you think it's and to be honest, based on what you're telling me, like from what I can tell, it's a lot of the issues arise from founders is quite literally due to the fact that there's just a glorification behind being a startup. Do you feel that? Like it's almost like, don't worry about it, just jump in. Like it's an idea. And people do that typically without being a little too secretive in my mind, where you're being so secretive to the point where you won't even talk to the customer who's the potential buyer of the product. And then
Yeah.
two, doing your research, right? Because you're like, I'll figure it out. Steve Jobs did it. Mark Zuckerberg did it. Like they all did it. I can do it. You know what I mean? So there's the whole stigma behind being that Amazon or the Facebook or the Google, but they don't actually realize that no, you're just starting another business. And if you get lucky, you might get to that level. But what are your thoughts
Yeah,
behind
excuse
that?
me. I think there's two points you just raised in my funny little brain. One was that like I think the days of the entrepreneur and it being very sexy to start a company, I think
Not
that's
there.
subsided so
Yeah.
much because it's hard to raise money. It's hard to build. It's easier to build a company, but harder in a lot of ways. And you have to have a conviction about what you're doing here that wasn't present 2 years ago. Like let's
Right.
just be honest, like people were raising money on a deck and a Rolodex, and now there's a higher barrier of entry. And I think the allure of becoming a paper millionaire overnight has subsided substantially.
Yeah.
um that's a big part of it. And that what was the second part of that? Because you raised another really great idea in my brain.
Yeah, I was just saying like the stigma behind becoming the Google, but also the fact that it's like, it's all very stealthy. It's keep your idea to yourself. So many people have been screwed. Don't talk to your
Yeah.
customers. Don't do this. And like, in my opinion, that's like the first thing you need to do is talk to your customers.
I was talking to a serial entrepreneur the other night, and amazing guy. I don't know if he wants me to shout him out or not, but we were talking about this thing. And it's like I had this thought of like they always tell founders always be fundraising, and I think that's a wrong mindset. Say
Oh,
always be
so wrong.
closing.
So
Close
wrong.
from
Yeah.
customers, like 'cause, like isn't the name of the game how many people you can get to like pay money for the thing that you're providing? You provide enough value that people give you money for the thing you've created.
They go
And
the other way. They go
how
try
do you know?
closing
Yes,
the
yes,
investors.
yes. Don't be afraid of your customer and be afraid of your investors. Like
Yes.
that's a like 101. And I find it so it's very confusing to me that and it's been something I've talked so many times about. Is like, hey, go sell a customer. Like, stop working on your pitch deck. Stop thinking about like the ways to get in front of a venture capitalist. Get in front of a customer, a potential customer, and try to sell them the thing and
Okay.
try to get them on board.
To that point, do you think that's because startups are under this pressure or under this again stigma? Let's go back to the stigma. Do you think they're under this stigma that they have to be successful within 6 months, otherwise they're dead in the water? Because in my mind, this is how I see it: is they raise a little bit of money, they start the product, right? But they're in their head, they're thinking, I have 6 months of runway in my head, like, right, like that's how I'm thinking. And if I don't hit that, like, I'm screwed. I need my next round to be able to save me. Whereas you should be going with the mindset of, I need to, for the first 2 years, pretend like I'm making zero money. I'm just trying to figure out who my customer is. Why is it that we need to be successful within a year versus what normally is, which is 2 to 3 years before you even hit the market?
I've always thought of like venture capital money as being like jet fuel to, or like rocket fuel for a rocket ship that's leaving the planet, right? So it has a certain trajectory. The course is not, one that's a parallel to the surface of the earth. It's actually trying to do something else. And I think that a lot of founders fall in the trap of like, hey, the only way I'm going to get this thing off the ground and have it have a chance to get into the stratosphere is if I build it fast, or like I can raise enough
Yeah.
money and gain enough momentum. And some of that's founded and some of that's unfounded. A lot of times you should be pressure testing whether the thing you're building has a broad enough appeal that it
Legs.
can
Yeah.
actually that it can do that jump. Because if you're trying to build it in the air and figure out your product market fit, sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't. But if
No,
you've tested a couple of avenues, you've talked to your customers, you know what they like, what they think of as
you
oxygen,
probably
and then
pivoted.
you could pivot a couple of times. Pivot in
Yeah.
quiet. Who cares? If you have a group of customers that are enthusiastic about what you're doing and you can do it better than anybody else, do that. And then when you go to the investors and say, I need fuel for my rocket ship,
Then
you're going to
it's,
have a
yeah.
lot easier time. Yes. You know why you can do like most of the time, and again, I'm generalizing so that none of this is like specific advice for anybody listening to us right now. But
It's
generally,
all general advice.
all advice is general. Don't quote me on this, but it is like if you've done this successfully before, you can probably raise on a deck and a Rolodex because you've proven you can build a company before, right?
100%.
But if it's your first time through, nobody wants you to learn on their dime. Okay,
Yeah.
like nobody wants to pay for you to go through the crash course of how to be an entrepreneur. Like
Yes.
that's just the truth of it. And so if you if you're thinking about the likelihood that you are that special person that is, the chosen one for a thing, it might be the truth or it might not. But I think testing with getting customers that want to test your product and give you feedback and potentially and start paying you for it is never a bad choice. I think it's the way to go and where you should start.
I think with the fundraising too, it becomes a lot easier to have those conversations with investors because you have all the answers, right? I see startups in pitches where they're just trying to figure it out, but they're trying to act confident in front of the investors. So they, this is a $10 billion market. Like, we're going to make this much money. And I'm like, you haven't even launched yet. You have no idea what's going to happen. Zero. And you're trying to raise $5 million. It's just bonkers to me. Where it's almost like the laws of business physics. I call it business physics. The laws of business physics is just thrown out the window when it comes to software, right? And it's just due to its scalability that it's thrown out on the wind. Let's call it
perceived scalability, and it's probably in direct relation to the private market valuations of companies. So it doesn't have to match up to like EBITDA and like multiples of revenue. It's just like, oh no, we have this much of a market that if we capture this percentage, it gets us to our valuation plus IP, blah blah blah. This is like great, and that's wonderful for the end game. In the beginning, what you really need to do is have a problem that's solvable, that you have an advantage in solving, and then get enough users that you can get useful feedback and figure out how to make that thing scalable, repeatable. And then start going aggressively after a customer base that will pay you for that. And then once you have proved that model out, then it's time to go get some investors so you can be the one that becomes the market leader in the space. 100%. I've always thought of capital as that thing, right? Especially around software. If you're like, no idea happens in a vacuum. And so 7 other people are working on the same idea, the same premise as you are. It's really about your ability to execute on that plan. Once you've figured out how to execute on it, the venture capital money, in my mind, is about separating you from the competition, making you the household name that everyone associates with the thing that you're doing. So you always have that leader's advantage, right? Or at least can have a bit of that and not give it away too easily.
100%.
That's the point view. If you're saying I need to raise capital so I can figure it out, if you're one of those people that's figured it out before, awesome. If you haven't, you're probably going to waste a lot of time and social capital trying to get money that may or may not ever come into the account.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you because, but even I even find like second time or second round founders, they're still not perfect. They're still trying to figure out, like the ones that made it successful, in my opinion, they have a lot of connections. They'll raise the capital they need to raise, but a lot of times they're going to fail just as bad as any other founder, because the problem is they'll have too much money. Too much money is bad too, and a lot of people don't realize that.
There was some study, I think like 7 or 8 years ago, that was the number of successful IPOs, tech IPOs, and companies that have raised over $100 million, and they were like a handful of companies. And then you look back like since that time period, how many tech companies have raised over $100 million? And it's like, it's bloated. And the takeaway from that article, I believe it was a Wall Street Journal article, I could be wrong. The takeaway was the problem with raising that much money is that you start to solve problems with money, and it becomes a culture of throwing money at problems instead of innovating through issues and saying like, well, how do we get this thing solved in-house? Who are the people in our team that can do this? You know what I mean? So
have you heard of Twitch?
Have I heard of what?
Twitch.
Of course I've heard of Twitch.
Well, just in case, you never know. Okay, so Twitch sold to Amazon, okay? Hey, I gotta ask, man. You never know these days.
I'm sorry. No, you're so right. I'm wrong. I'm taking the L now. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. This is why we always go over, by the way, for time.
Bro, it was funny because I was just playing Switch for a couple of minutes right before I came over.
There you go.
I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom. I'm like, oh, I gotta hop on this pod. So then I'm like, of course I know Twitch. Like, you weren't in the room watching me play Tears of the Kingdom. Like,
correct.
How would you know I'm a gamer? Like, yeah.
But anyways, they sold the main guy. There was a bunch of them, but Justin was one of them. I don't know if you know the old co-founder.
No, I don't know.
Okay, so Justin was one of them. They started it off with Justin TV. Like, that's where they got the whole idea of Twitch, right? Like, this guy was just on TV at all times, like on YouTube, I think it was. And they're like, this many people want to watch me just exist. Why not create a platform for that? And that's where Twitch became a thing. And he actually sold the company to Amazon, I believe, bought it, and they walked their separate ways. He raised something stupid like 10-20 million dollars on a pre-seed. Okay. And he literally he famously went on his Instagram and he was like, my company failed. I had too much money. We didn't actually have a problem. We didn't know what our problem, the problem we were trying to solve was. We were spending money left and right on trying to solve the problem. It's exactly what you said. And he literally did that. And that's a successful second time founder that didn't succeed, right? So I do agree with the fact that there's that balance that you got to learn to talk to and you cannot defy the laws of business physics. That's why I always say this to people. But how do you? But here's the thing:
making a brand new market, maybe like if you're doing Facebook, right? You're making a new market.
But Facebook had MySpace.
They did, yeah. So I mean,
right? And by the way, Facebook was still in some house in San Francisco, up to 5 years.
Yeah.
They still weren't making money for 5 years, right? Like people don't realize that. Like Steve, what's his face? Oh my God, the CEO of CEO. Why am I forgetting his name?
I know. Now you put Steve in my head too, and it's not
Steve Jobs. No, not him.
I know it's not going to happen. Mark
Zuckerberg. Okay, so Mark Zuckerberg, right? Yeah. He didn't take money from he didn't take pay. You know what I mean? And so I think again, like we hear the overnight success, but I always say, like, whenever I talk to founders, I'm like, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of things that go into it. Some of it's luck, timing, team, market conditions, and a lot of it's just ability to stay alive. I think the Cockroach founder gets a lot done and has a lot more likelihood of a successful outcome because they're able to survive, and they have a lot of different ways. Yeah, they could stomp on them, but you have to kill them a bunch of times to actually kill them. So that's probably a noble trait is the Cockroach founder. I'm a big fan of that. The other thing around the spending the money too fast and getting the money too fast is like, well, that might be in the investor's best incentive. You know, that's in their incentive for you to burn through money quickly or give you a bunch of cash and say, go burn this the next 2 years because they got to raise another fund. Yeah. And you're the product that they raise their fund on. When they go out to their LPs, fund of funds, and when they go out to family offices and high net worths and institutional investors, they're showing them their logos of the companies that they have invested in. They're telling the story. Your story is a part of their pitch. Yeah. And so
they're salespeople too.
Exactly. If you're going out and around and they're like, hey, we're going to be able to get this company at this rate, like you're going to get in, you're already getting this markup for them being in the portfolio. That's in their best incentive for you to go out and burn money. That's not always in the company's best interest, and it's not in the founder's best interest. It's like, hey, how do I build this thing? Make sure that when we're adding fuel to the fire or adding the rocket fuel into the engine here, we can get where we need to go for our milestones to get us to the next level of where we need to be successful. And most of the time, it's through customer acquisition and revenue. How do we get more customers on to involved in what we're doing? How do we monetize that customer base? How do we make this repeatable? So we understand our process, understand, hey, I can do this. I can scale this. This is rentable, this is repeatable. And by the way, I don't have to be involved as much because I have a defined process where I can put people in place to execute whether I'm here or not.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. What is your, talking about how business does take a while. You can't necessarily always do it in 6 months to a year. Let's say you are doing it in 2-3 years. You don't have that much capital to burn. So how do you suggest navigating that? Because you do have to have, especially in software, it's not a cheap endeavor.
I get the question. I think one of my longtime founder friends, and now I'm like a couple of generations of founders in now, which is kind of cool and interesting because I'm cross mixing with like this new up and coming group of founders, and it's enriching for both ends of that spectrum. He told me once, he said, he actually was talking to a whole group of people, and he said founders should figure out how to do to live for free. He said you should figure out how to before you start a company, figure out how to live for free. Figure out how to create.
You can't be a bougie founder. You can't be a bougie founder.
You can if that's where you come from, but if you don't try to be that person. Like
But
be
you're gonna
scrappy.
burn through so much cash.
You
You're gonna have
can't,
to
but
give
if
yourself
again,
like 10K a month. That's a
okay, but if
lot.
you have a but okay, but let's play the devil's advocate. If you come from a situation or
Fair,
network or family that has
fair.
tons of
Yeah,
money,
yeah.
you can be that person if you know like, hey, there's no bottom of this barrel.
a
But if
hundred
you're
percent.
not
Yeah.
coming from that situation, I didn't come from that. I don't know about you, but like I couldn't do that stuff. And suggested advice is like figure out how to make enough money to get by and to live off that and not take up your zone of genius time working for somebody else. So he
Yeah.
had some funny ideas on how to do it and how he's done it. And his current company is doing amazing. I think it was his fourth venture. It's going really, really well. And I think part of the reason he attributes that success is like he figured out I can't be worrying about how I'm gonna pay my bills and launch a company.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Like that,
so hard.
if you're worried about your primary needs, you're not going to be able to. Your best brain power is not going to be used on the thing you're trying to build. And by the way, you're going to need all of that to build a great company. And
Yeah.
this and that second like side of that is like, okay, well, if I'm working a job part time because people shoo that no one's going to invest in me if I'm working a job. Well, if you're like building like a alpha or you're building a beta version of the product and you're getting users on to try things, there's nothing wrong with you having a job that is paying the bills. My only caveat to that is has always been make sure it's not taking away from your genius. Like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're if it's like you're using all your good energy on your day job, your mission that you're building on the side is never going to be the main thing. Like it just
Yeah.
can't happen. If it's something that you can do in your sleep and you're getting paid, or like you can kind of show up and clock in, clock
That'd
out,
be
or
nice.
whatever the case may be,
Rare.
and people, hey, but people find those like
Yeah.
this entrepreneur, and he's like, here's an example of a bunch of ones that he suggested for that. Okay, if you can do that, and if you need to do that, but find your way of getting the
Can
thing
we
to
list those
a
things or
of a couple of them were I don't want to insult different types of
yeah, don't
jobs.
worry about it.
Okay, I'll give one like a building security guards.
Yeah.
Okay, so that you're there for a long amount of time. A lot of times they don't ask you to be on their software. They just need you to keep an eye on things. You can code at a desk,
Yeah, that's
and you
true.
get paid a decent money. If you can probably handle that job, and if you get interrupted and have to do your job, it doesn't like blow up your night. I'll tell you what
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
wouldn't do if I was a founder and I'm in like doing a lot of selling for my company. I wouldn't want a sales job.
No. Because
All
then
right,
you'd
so
have to be on top of it. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
right. If I'm a technical founder, my chief ability is coding. I wouldn't want to be coding all day and then
Yeah.
try to code my stuff. Seen that so many times. Generally doesn't work. You kind of want to split it up into another way of spending your time so you don't get to your thing and you're just depleted.
That's actually bang on. It's your genius, right? Like your genius is
Yes.
the code. So if you've already depleted that all day, how can you possibly continue that in the evening doing that as a side gig? You're 100%.
Also, it's also confusing to me when someone goes into a field that they have no relationship with, and
I have
they don't
this
have any,
idea.
I have this idea. They have no relationship, they have no background, and they have no advantage in that space. And it's like, so why are you doing
the
this?
the best part is I will ask those people always. I will say, "Okay, well like why are you doing this? Like what's like what's going on?" And their literal response is, "Well, it just makes sense." Like it's just common. It just like does it not make sense to you? I'm like, "It makes sense to me." But you have no relation to the industry. So, like like what's the saying? Like what they say about common sense. It's not very common. So
Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
may think it's common sense, but trust me, it's not common.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a bit of hubris that goes into some of these things, and you have to be have a little bit of hubris to get to start a company, and a lot of belief in yourself and ability to execute. But you can't be blind to your own weaknesses and your own,
Yes.
and not know who you are. Like you should have a pretty good idea of what you're incredible at, and probably build something in one of those avenues that where you are, where you fly where others are like struggling to walk or
So
crawl.
this is a perfect segue to co-founders, I think,
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
that's where you can really take advantage and become like I've seen
Oh yeah.
great salespeople,
Hmm.
right? Partner up with an industry expert who really
Hmm.
understands the industry and they
Hmm.
crush it. Because the
Hmm.
sales guy will understand how to sell it. The industry expert knows everything, and they can translate to both sales and development team.
Absolutely.
That's a killer combination, in my opinion, because it's hard to find an industry expert who actually knows how to sell really well. Like those co-founders or those founders are really hard to find.
Really, what I think there's a piece of it that's like the skill set or the direct skill set that they can implant, but it's also a personality thing.
Yeah.
Like, because you're trying to fill up as much. I think it was like the two, let's call it the classic two co-founders going in together. You want to cover as much surface area in your skill sets as possible, right? The two of you should be covering as much, and then the areas that you're covering should probably be directly related to the problem you're solving, the company you're building, right? It needs to have enough overlap, and you need to be covering enough of that circle that's like, okay, the worst thing that you can do is to go into a company where you're co-founding a company with yourself. Someone who's so similar to you that people forget that you two are two different people.
100%.
Or that your skill sets are so overlapping that like one of you ends up doing the thing that neither of you are really good at and neither of you like doing. So like people, the average venture lasts longer than like the average marriage. Take time when you're finding your co-founder, be picky, like swipe left. Is that the thing? I've never been on a dating app.
We should make that a thing.
Swipe left, right? Swipe left. Be picky and like take your time before you to jump in with somebody to make sure that they're the right person. That you are going to be able to stand each other because you're going to go through some stuff together. You want to make sure when the stuff hits the fan, you two are going to be able to stick together and make it through that. Because more times than not, there's going to be a lot of unexpected twists and turns, a ton of challenges.
100%.
If you're not like a person that coexists really well with that other person, it's just not going to work.
In my opinion, if you haven't thought of that, you're delusional.
Again, but what do you say? You got to know yourself. Like, if you're a founder, you got to know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, it's going to be really problematic.
Well, because then you don't know what to look for in the co-founder and things like that, for sure.
And by the way, I'll raise my hand. I'm at multiple times and even recently have been like, I can do this thing. And thank goodness I listen to people around like, you can't do that thing. And I'm like, all right, thanks for telling me. If you aren't good at knowing yourself, surround yourself with people that you trust and can tell you the truth. That's the shortcut, by the way.
Now, Robert, you know what I'm going to ask. What are you not good at?
Oh man!
Actually, hold on, Robert. Let's ask a better question. Because this is a much better question in my opinion, because this will kind of get a good idea, right? In your mind, and I'll go next. In your mind, what are you great at and what are you bad at, and who would be your ideal co-founder? Let's hear your exercise. Let's see how you would actually do this internally.
Yeah, so I'm really good at ideas, and I'm really good at getting people excited about what I'm doing, and I'm really good at picking people. Like those are my three areas. Like
Steve Jobs.
Teams. Huh? You're
Steve Jobs.
No, that's a really really demeaning to Steve Jobs. So I can't claim that. I won't claim that. And so
I thought you were going to be demeaning for me.
No, man. That's terrible for Steve. Like he changed the way we live.
Okay, but he had the same traits. His focus was ideas. Team, and he was charismatic as hell.
I'm the Wish version of Steve Jobs.
Okay, there you go. That's a good one. Okay.
So my ideal co-founder is actually somebody I worked with at First Republic was Annika Havlicek. She's just like she's the how to all my whats and whys.
So she's the operator.
She was just like, here's how we do that. Here's what I need you to do. And then she just always, and then she was a great sounding board for like my terrible ideas. So I spent more time in her office talking about what we were doing and why and how we were going to do it than I ever did before. And it was the best thing for me because I was like, that's the person and that's the prototype of the person I need with me to be successful.
Okay, so I'm interesting. I'm in a way where like I can come up with ideas. I love coming up with ideas, but I can execute on the ideas.
Ooh.
Right? So there's a weird twist there. I'm charismatic because I can draw people to the idea and the team. My biggest fault and like the downfall of me is I hate mundane tasks. I hate mundane like just emailing people, following up, like that stuff kills me inside. So
Same.
I'd rather have a team that does that for me, where I can just focus on execution, and you know what I mean? But
Yes.
it's so hard to do that. Like, how are you going to bring a co-founder to be like, hey, by the way, all I need you to do is respond to these emails?
Can I be honest? I think some like the double opt-in is the bane of my existence.
Oh, dude,
Oh gosh, it's the worst.
the
But
worst.
I don't think I think there's other skill sets that come along with people that enjoy doing the things that no one else likes to do. And it's not just
100%.
like, oh, they do mundane things. Like, no, they care intimately
No, they
about
love that.
details.
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah,
love that stuff. Like,
yeah, yeah,
no, this is the most important thing. And
yeah,
on
yeah,
our end, we're biased towards the other side. Like, no, what we do is the most important thing. The truth is, it
yeah.
takes both of those things to be successful. Find somebody whose joy and delight in their life is doing the things that you don't like to do but need to get done. You'll probably be pretty successful if you can coexist with them for a long time.
Like, when I hear legal and accounting, I die
Ugh.
inside. Like, my soul leaves my body. Like, when the people are like, yeah, we got to review this contract, I'm like, I'm not, no. I don't
I,
want to.
I was thinking about this idea of a bad movie that it would just be like people, we all basically trade away all of our freedoms by agreeing to the terms and agreement that Apple sends us, and nobody besides like a very select few read through
Lawyers.
before we click
It's
off on,
literally
right?
lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. The lawyers will be okay, and the rest of us,
And
we're
the
all,
best part is the lawyers will sit there and be like, I'm not agreeing to this, but I want to still use the product. It's like, well, you can't have the best of both worlds. I'm suing.
exactly.
That's literally
Yeah,
the
it's
response. I'm suing.
but I think the wonderful thing about us as a species is that generally, like broadly expressed, people have different interests in things that make their brain go brrr,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah, yeah.
makes it just go. And so I think where you can like align people with the things you need and the thing that makes them happy and fulfilled and makes them go, that's real. And as long as you can work together very well, that's not a given. That is like what you need in recipe wise to make something big and special together. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that if we have that, if we can do the things and we enjoy doing the things that offset each other's skills enough, and we're all in this together and have passion and respect for each other, we can probably go pretty far.
Right.
And maybe we hit our ceiling and the board votes us out and brings in more, people more senior than us, but we're going to learn a ton in that process.
100%. So,
Yeah.
so Robert, listen, you're charismatic. You're an awesome guy. I actually genuinely love having conversations with you. Why haven't you started your own fund? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a man. If I had $1 for every time I get asked that, I'd have $3. No, that no, I'm
Excellent.
kidding.
See that
No,
we're
no,
already off to a good start.
no. I've gotten that question a lot. It's either like, when are you going to start your own company, or are you going to start a fund?
Company
I
is
think
tough.
I think both of them are tough. I
Yeah,
think both of them are
true,
tough. I mean,
true.
I spend part of my role that's somewhat uncommon is that I spend time with the fund managers and I spend time with the
Right.
founders, and like there's I know how hard it is to do both of those things, and I don't think that either of them are particularly easy, and I know that the skill sets you need are pretty need to be outsized as far as like your advantage over the field, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
100%.
I think I'm building a skill set that will be useful in the at some point in the future for me to go build my own thing, and I'm working towards that. But I don't think I haven't had a problem that I feel like I need to solve that somebody else isn't solving yet. That's like, you have the
Yeah, you're
advantage
talking
of
about a
solving
business.
this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and on the fun side, it's like, well, maybe that comes up in the future. Maybe that happens, but like I think it would need it needs a couple more iterations of maturity, expertise, and
like a good
know-how from.
co-founder.
Yeah, man. So don't. I know that's part of it for sure. I mean, if somebody needed like
Yeah,
someone who's going to elevate the brand of a fund, sure, I could do that all day. But as
yeah,
far
yeah.
as bringing more to the table, I have some of that skill set, and I'm acquiring the rest. But I think I would want to be able to be very confident that I would be able to deploy other people's capital and get returns that were worthy of that trust. So
What do you
that's where I'm stopping short.
what do you think of the community right now, both in the fundraising world and the startup world? What are you seeing right now happening? Because I've seen cash flow is still happening on the investor
Mm,
side, but
mm.
now all of a sudden the business physics are important, right?
Mhm.
And on the startup side, I've seen one of two ways is they're still in the 2020 or 2016 mindset, which is
Mhm.
raise, and survive on raise.
Mhm.
And then the other side is now like they're being overly cautious and to the point where
Mhm.
they're just not even starting it anymore. What are you seeing?
Yeah. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I think the overwhelming sense of where I'm looking would have been talking about and thinking about a lot has been that nobody's moving in any direction with like conviction.
Yeah.
And so everyone's sort of like false starting or trying to get things going, and there's a general malaise around the like and um, a lot of discussion around what direction things are headed in. And when
Right.
there's lack of confidence in the direction of things, it's hard to plan and go and do for most people. I do believe the best funds and the best companies are being made and have been started in the last 24 months. But I also know that the fundraising environment it's been a winter of fundraising for 2 years now. I just saw the numbers for how much money got raised for startups in the U.S. and it was a fraction of what it was the year before, which was less than it was the year before. Granted, though, that was a historic year,
Yeah.
in any effect, getting a hold of capital is harder. Growing, if you're operating on a model of 2020 and how to run a company, uh, I don't know how you have any cash left because that's not really
Yeah.
the way it's
Yeah.
going.
A lot of
You
those
know,
Series A, Series Bs are really struggling right now because of the fact that they were raising on survival, and now investors are no longer funding survival. They're funding
mhm.
growth and not survival.
Right. And those fund managers are in a little bit of pickle sometimes too, where they bought in at the peak and
Yeah.
there's just no way that a lot of the performing assets in their portfolio that they
They have
were,
to do a down
touting
round.
as like yeah, they're going to have down rounds and that's going to have implications when they go to raise their next fund and talking to their LP base and saying, "Hey, we have this thesis and we have these returns," when those returns aren't what they were
2 years
anticipating.
ago, yeah.
Oh, man, I mean, it's not just one fund. It's a lot of there's a lot of it was very frothy,
Yes.
and I think valuations were out of
Sky
whack completely.
way out of whack. I think
And
they were.
how do you?
I know a startup that did a round on. I think it was like 70 times revenue.
I, I
70
s-
times.
I saw one at 100 times revenue.
That's bonkers.
I mean, so how do you get a valuation today? Excuse me, or in the next couple of years that is anywhere near that? Like, I just
I
don't
don't think
see
you
it.
can. You can't.
So those portfolios that have
Like
a number
20
of those are upside down.
like 20 times is like for software is normal. I would even go like 20, 30 is really good, 40 is great, 50 is amazing, but like 100 times that's like you're not going
Yeah.
to hit that. Like there's no way you're going to be able to hit that in the next 3 years. What are like yeah, okay. So we're on the
So
same page.
there's a lot of that, and I think there's going to be a clearing of the field. Just like there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of companies that are alive today that won't be alive at the end of this year. There's going to be a lot of funds that were alive today that won't be alive at the end of the year.
There's already a record of funds shutting down.
Yeah, and I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. So I think
Yeah.
it's gonna, but I do think all these corrections, as painful as they are when you're going through them, are really good for the industry.
Yes.
And I think the big winner in most of this are going to be the founders, where they're going to get back to basic principles of like, hey,
Yes.
here's how I run a business. I gotta get the like I have to have a path to profitability. It doesn't need to be a thing I'm doing, but I need to have a path. So if the money train dries up at the
I can
flow of
survive.
funds, I can survive. And here's my plan to do that.
Yes.
This is like we had to get some sort of reset, and there has to be a little bit more alignment between the private market valuation and public market valuation of companies. When there's too much of a delta between that, it stifles the IPOs, it stifles the mergers and acquisitions. The whole thing slows down. The liquidation of companies and getting money back into the LP's arms and pocketbooks, it stifles the whole thing. You want to have a little bit more alignment so it makes sense for everybody involved to go through those
I've
transactions.
I've also mentioned the fact that this is the perfect time for startups because there's going to be a huge amount of layoffs coming on in the development world which by the way is going to price correct them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're no longer going to be able to dictate. Like I've seen some developers who should not be developers. If anything, like they're decent at best, and $185,000. I'm like, there's no way you should be making that much. There's no way. Like you should be at 80K because you're almost a junior, right? Like you're 100K max, but they're able to dictate so much because there's so few of them. And I think that's going to be corrected, and that's going to be a really good opportunity for startups because now they can actually get in and get a co-founder that's good, that was making 200K. He got laid off, but he's good, right? But he's like, you know what? I can survive for a year without income. I'm good with that, right? So I think that opportunity is huge for startups, actually, that correction.
I think so too. Also, some of the big boys are not they're thinning the staff a bit. That means
Yes.
some talented people that have been on the shelves for 5, 6 years, maybe with some golden handcuffs, are now like, hey, I'm gonna go start something. I'm encountering some of those in the wild, and it's great to see.
Yeah.
And so I think similar to like I'm sure when the gold rush was happening in California, there were people making really bad axes and picks and
Oh,
pans, right?
100%. Yeah.
And overcharging for them and just like and selling the dream to dreamers, and like
Yep.
that's great, but like they're that's great for you in the short term, but long term, like that's not great for anybody. So I think a correction in the developer world is great for all of us as well. And some
Yeah.
of these automated tools are forcing change,
Yeah.
or
True.
force agents for
True.
change, and that's great. And so
100%.
I think what we all ultimately want to get to is a thriving ecosystem where companies are able to get the capital they need to scale the companies they built, not the ideas, the companies they built, and to grow lean and efficient, like valuable companies for all of us. And ideally, those are enhancing the species somehow.
Right.
They're bringing value
Yeah.
to everyone.
Yeah.
Um, it's a shame that like the biggest innovations in the last couple of years that we all kind of touch all our lives are like Uber Eats,
Yeah.
uh, wouldn't it be great if we
Making
were
us
like
more lazy.
well, it's not, I guess that's part
Convenient.
of it, and the other part is like let's solve some bigger problems together.
Yeah.
Let's use our collective genius not to just make life more convenient, but to solve some bigger problems. And I think there's a lot of people working hard on that, and I think the we're getting closer to having some major breakthroughs in some of
Yeah.
those areas.
True.
That's cool. And
True.
I think if capital is being deployed efficiently and is working for all the investors, then we can spend more of our money on the things that help all of us. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And
Okay. So
yeah,
now let's say a founder is doing decent, right? There's
uh-huh.
a couple of things that I call the crossroads, right? Or you
Ooh,
call the crossroads. I call them the parts where you're going to hit those marks. So milestones. One of the milestones for me is picking a board,
mm,
mentorship,
mm.
and and those are two big ones. Like they're massive, right? Like even like picking a mentor is a hard thing to do. How do you give advice to the startups you work with on how to make a call on those crossroads, as you call
I'm not good at board selection. It's
them?
not an area where like I just
I don't think anybody is.
there's a lot of people that have a lot more expertise on it. I just tend to send them to. So I have a couple of serial entrepreneur founders who
Yeah.
have done it a bunch of times and have a lot of experience, and they're a much better guide in that area. And I'm not gonna give advice that I don't have any idea. On the mentor one, I got some great advice, probably a little too late in life, or I might have had some better outcomes. But one was like, have a mentor that's your age, have one that's younger than you,
Yeah.
and have one that's older than you.
That's a
And
good
like
call.
whether you're in starting a company or not, I don't think it's a bad idea to have those. Um, and,
How do
and
you
like
how do you suggest approaching mentors? Because it's not always easy.
it's the easy. I think it's the easiest thing. You just ask them,
I think
like,
it's the
hey,
easiest thing to do. I don't think it's easy. I don't think entrepreneurs find themselves like find it easy in their heads to do it. So, do you
yeah,
have any advice for them?
yeah, it's a moment of vulnerability because you're saying
Yes.
I think you have a lot of knowledge that I don't have and a lot of experience that I don't have, or a lot of fill in the blank that I don't have. And I would love for you to be my mentor and help me shore up those areas that are weaknesses, or not as strong as my other areas.
Yeah.
Would you be, well, I would really appreciate if you would be my mentor. I think the actual bigger challenge besides like
It's
asking
easy.
a
Yeah.
mentor is finding the right one. It's like
Yeah,
the one,
that's the
like
hardest part. Yeah.
identifying like, oh my gosh, this person has so much that I could learn from them, and I feel like it would be rewarding for them to also be engaged with me. Like that's hard. Also, the same age one is a tricky one. You have to find someone that actually cares about your outcome and isn't in a secret competition with you. And I
And
found that
also,
that's
you have to
hard.
respect them too. That's a big one. Like respect. You have to find respect for them just as much as you would find respect for yourself, right? Because if
Absolutely.
you don't respect them, what's the point of having them as a mentor? You're just gonna wave them
That's
off,
not a
anyways.
mentor. That's
Yeah.
you calling someone a mentor who like you secretly think less of. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
weird.
Exactly. Which is
It
bonkers.
should be
Yeah.
it should be somebody that you like you think the world of, and disappointing them would hurt you
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think those like finding a mentor, sourcing that person is probably harder than asking or recognizing that hey, this person brings a lot to the table. And a lot of times it's just opening your network to outside of people that are you. I think
Right.
a big problem that people have when they're looking for co-founders or for mentors or advisors, their whole network is like people just like them. They're probably not going to be there. You probably want people that they have some common traits with you, their shared values or shared experience or something along those lines. There's enough of a thread that binds you together. But ultimately, they can't be too much like you because they don't have anything to offer you.
Yeah.
You know,
100%. I
like
agree with that.
you really you should be looking for the things that you lack in those people, and then people that do it in a way that you admire. It should be someone that you admire and want to be like, and reflect in some ways. And a good mentor wants their mentee to do better than them, wants them
Yeah.
to succeed them, wants them to surpass them. And that's not easy to find either. There's a lot of people
Hmm.
that will want to get you up to their level or just below and say, well, they never were better than me. And like probably not the best mentor. Can you get something out of them? Sure. But is that the best mentor? Probably not. You want somebody that wants the absolute best for you, even succeeding them.
100%. I agree with that.
Out succeeding them. I don't know how
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that.
No, no, I
Surpassing
agree.
them, right?
Surpassing them.
That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
that's the idea. Yeah.
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 Okay, one. We're coming up on time, so I don't want to. I don't
Oh,
want to. We can keep going, but what is the one advice you have for any fresh entrepreneur coming out and saying, "I want to be an. I want to create my own software company."
I would say meet as many other founders as you can.
Yeah.
I think one of the big misconceptions for first time founders is like, I need to meet investors, and it's like, yeah, great. How do you do that?
Yeah.
What you really need to do is surround yourself with meet as many founders as you can and find your crew. Excuse me. The highest investment put through of like introductions to investment in VC is come from portfolio company referrals. So founder the VC invests in a founder. That founder brings them someone else. They invest in that someone else.
Yes.
Your
Yes.
best
Yes.
path to getting funding is surrounding yourself with other awesome entrepreneurs. Also,
100%.
those are the only people that actually know what you're going
Understand
through.
you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's
Yeah.
like one of the wisest entrepreneurs I ever met. He was intentional about this, and he had four other people that he would do monthly get-togethers with, and they would share their experiences with each other. They would give each other advice and encourage each other. And they had a text thread that the five of them were on, and constantly chattering. And it was and what he said was, it's really hard to tell the truth to anybody when you're a founder. It's
Yes.
very lonely. And
Yes.
so having someone that understands what you're going through, and wants the best outcomes for you, and has enough of understanding of everything, but you can be honest with them, that is an
Massive. Yeah.
unbelievable advantage.
I
And
agree
by
with
the
that.
way, if you surround yourself with the right person, one of you is going to hit it with a
Yeah, and
great
that the
investor.
other person is going to bring you in. hundred
Exactly.
percent. A
Stop
hundred
going
percent.
stop going to panels and listening to VCs tell you things that they don't actually think.
Yeah.
There's are pre-canned questions and pre-canned answers. What you want to do is spend
My favorite in those
really
panels
great.
are sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but my
No,
favorite
no.
part about those panels is they'll sit there and be like, yeah, no, that was good. That was good. Here's where, I got stuck, but otherwise it was really good. I was like, if it was good, why don't you invest in it? Exactly. It wasn't good.
Yeah. I heard someone said it, and it was like always stuck with me. Like VCs have no incentive to say no. I was
Yeah,
like,
they've none.
okay,
Why would they?
okay,
By the way,
maybe there's none.
to go back to the entrepreneur thing, I agree with you. I
Yeah.
mean, I've gone to dinners with entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs, and I'll be like, "Oh man, I'm struggling with this," and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm struggling with that," and like
Yes.
you have this weird connection where you're like, "Okay, it's not just me. All right, good."
Yeah. I've always thought of, well, not always, but I think of, for a long time I've thought of entrepreneurs as adventurers in a way, where
Yeah,
they're doing something that is uncommon enough that they don't have a lot of, there's no real roadmap. There's definitely no GPS for getting it done. You're sort of the people can give you advice and feedback, but you're doing something and going somewhere that nobody else or very
yeah,
few people have gone before. And so it can feel kind of lonely and isolating. Don't exacerbate that by going into a bubble and developing like a
yeah,
I am the one complex. Like, so get yourself a group of people that you trust, that you love, that you care about, and lean on them, and they will lean on you. Like, you'll get farther with them as a crew, like a small crew of people, than you will by yourself. So it gives you another couple of at bats. It gives you
yeah,
another. It gives maybe it's maybe it doesn't make the difference, but I don't think it would hurt. And
yeah,
so I think it's very hard though when you're out on your own and you're
yeah,
doing a thing that no one's done before to raise your hand. It's like, hey, this isn't going well, and like I need advice on this or that, and have somebody who's actually in the same or roughly the same situation be able to give you their best take on it. Like that's what you really want.
yeah. I couldn't
That's the
agree
thing
more.
right there.
I couldn't agree more.
That's the that's a awesome, and like I forget who the I know the entrepreneur's name, but yeah, they, more advice like that I think would be helpful for founders of like, don't chase the money, chase the people. Chase
Yeah,
the people that you can surround yourself with that are going to make you better. They're going to help you get better. They're going to be there for you. They're going to want to support you. That intimate,
yeah,
that care thoroughly about your outcome. That's and also make sure they're high quality people. You know, if you're
mhm,
getting around, if you're hanging around with C's, you're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna do very well.
yeah.
Um, be around people that are going places and have a similar trajectory as you. That's the missing chunk in the wisdom book that they hand out at Entrepreneurship 101.
I love that. I love that. Robert, you're an amazing person. Just so you know, I'm a big fan of you. Thank you
I
for
forgot one of
being
my
here.
weaknesses.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
forgot
Go,
one
go,
of my
go, go.
weaknesses.
Please
Before you end this wonderful conversation, I forgot one of my weaknesses.
go.
Compliments. I
Come.
can't take a compliment. I'm like, I'm turning red right now and I'm cringing. Like, if everybody thinks like I'm shameless and you see me on LinkedIn or whatever, and you're like that guy, or you see me at events, like maybe that guy, I don't know. I don't know about him. Let me tell you something. If you want to see me cringe and squirm and look very,
Compliment
very
you.
uncomfortable, say anything nice about me. And I come to pieces. I don't know what that is. I'm trying to work through it. I honestly cannot deal with it. Like, I'm,
Oh my god.
I'm red right now, and I'm like hunched over, and I'm like, oh, he's saying
You're like,
nice
stop
things
it.
about me. Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
just, yeah,
No more compliments. I gave it to you once. We'll move on from it. But thank you for being here
thanks for having me.
and chatting with our startups. I think what you have to say is massive, and you talk to so many of them, talk to so many people. You've even built sorry, I won't compliment you. You built an ecosystem. Yep.
No,
Within yourself, right? And I think what you're doing is insanely awesome for startups because I don't think there's enough of us trying to help startups. I think there's too many people trying to take advantage of startups that have succeeded, but no one's really there at the beginning side, right? So
you play short games. You play the short game, you win the short game. Play the long
yeah,
game, you win the long game. And
a
like,
hundred percent.
I think doing the right thing and playing on a time horizon where like I'm thinking about like 20, 30 years from now, like how are entrepreneurs going to think about how I interacted with them? Was I
Yes,
helpful? Was I kind?
yes,
Was I
a hundred
fair?
percent.
That's important. The last thing I'll end with, not that you asked for, it was like I was thinking about this in my head is like one advice I give to entrepreneurs is like don't worry about being right, worry about getting it right. Don't like
A hundred
just
percent.
like
A hundred percent.
date your ideas, don't marry them. Like get feedback from people and filter that against their experience and what you're hearing from others. What I'm saying, it may be wrong, And if I'm the only one saying it, it's probably wrong. But if you're hearing it over and over again, there might be something there worth investigating. And
100%.
so, yeah, just be obsessed with getting it right. Surround yourself with amazing people, and then ask for help when you need it,
I love it.
because we all need help. Yeah,
I love it. Thank you so much for
all right.
being here, Robert. And that
I
is sound
appreciate you.
advice. I couldn't agree more with you. So, all right, to
Final
everybody
test.
else, yeah. To everybody else listening at home, thank you all for listening and watching. It was, Robert has had extensive experience with this kind of stuff, so he knows what he's saying. And I, for one, vouch for him. He's an amazing person as a whole, let alone a person who helps you out. Sorry, don't turn red. It's okay. I'm not paying attention to you, Robert. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to shut my camera.
I'm dying.
I see your heart rate increasing somehow.
You're the reason I drink.
All right, everybody at home, thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe to our channel. We do every other week. We do videos with experts like Robert. So if you know anyone that is interested in watching stuff like this, please do share. But until next time, Corridor out. Thanks for watching.